Welcome to the Galactic Academic Council's most prestigious research facility, where the galaxy's brightest minds gather to study the fascinating subject of psychological breaking points. And by fascinating, I mean absolutely terrifying if you happen to be the test subject. The facility floated serenely in the Andromeda sector, its chrome surfaces gleaming like a particularly expensive coffin. Inside, Professor Vex Allah strutted through the corridors with the confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything, ever. Her forearms gestured dramatically as she explained her revolutionary research to anyone unfortunate enough to make eye contact. You see, she announced to her long-suffering assistant Clorp, a nervous blue creature who looked like someone had crossed a ferret with anxiety itself, but I have discovered the ultimate psychological stress test. No species has ever completed level 7 without complete mental dissolution. Clorp scribbled notes frantically, his three eyes darting between his tablet and Vex Allah's imposing figure. But Professor, are you certain about testing it on the human? The ethics committee seemed rather concerned about potential lawsuits. Vex Allah's laugh could have powered a small starship. Clorp, my dear, simple-minded assistant. Humans are notoriously fragile when it comes to psychological pressure. They cry over broken communication devices and have emotional breakdowns when their food takes longer than expected to arrive. This test will prove once and for all that humans are the weakest link in our galactic chain of intelligence. Enter Maya Rodriguez, a human exchange student who had somehow managed to charm her way into the galaxy's most exclusive academic program. She bounded into the research facility wearing the kind of smile that should have been classified as a dangerous weapon. Her enthusiasm was so aggressively cheerful that several alien researchers had to look away to avoid being blinded by optimism. "Hi there," Maya chirped, extending her hand toward Vex Allah, who stared at it like it might explode. "I'm here about the volunteer position for your stress research. I read your paper on psychological breaking points, and honestly, it sounds like fun." The silence that followed was so profound that somewhere in the galaxy, a black hole stopped sucking for a moment out of sheer confusion. Vex Allah recovered first, her forearms practically vibrating with academic smugness. "Fun," she repeated slowly, savoring the word like fine wine. "Yes, well, I suppose ignorance can be blissful. Are you certain you understand what you're volunteering for, human?" "Oh, absolutely," Maya said, still radiating that dangerous level of enthusiasm. "You're going to subject me to increasingly intense psychological stressors until I break down completely. It's like escape rooms, but with more existential dread. Sign me up." What? Clorp made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a dial-up internet connection. "Professor, perhaps we should reconsider. The human seems unusually cheerful." "Nonsense," Vex Allah declared, her academic pride overriding any survival instincts. "This is perfect. The more confident they are, the more spectacular their inevitable collapse will be. It will make excellent footage for my presentation at the Galactic Psychology Conference." Maya clapped her hands together with the enthusiasm of someone about to ride the galaxy's most dangerous roller coaster. "When do we start?" "I brought snacks and everything." The stress chamber looked like what would happen if a torture device in a high-tech laboratory had a particularly unpleasant baby. Screens covered every wall, sensors monitored everything from brainwaves to breakfast preferences, and the air hummed with the kind of technological menace that suggested things were about to get very interesting very quickly. Maya settled into the central chair like she was getting ready to binge-watch her favorite show. "Wow, this is quite the setup. Very dystopian chic. I love what you've done with the ominous red lighting." In the observation room, Vex Allah's smug expression could have powered a small moon. Her forearms danced across the control panels with the grace of a conductor orchestrating humanity's downfall. "Begin phase 1, she commanded, her voice dripping with academic superiority. The first test was simple: solve increasingly complex mathematical equations while lights flashed at seizure-inducing frequencies. 3 Zephyrian scholars had already been reduced to gibbering mathematical soup by this level. Maya tilted her head, studying the first equation. Oh, this is just calculus with a twist of alien number systems. Neat. She started solving problems while humming what sounded suspiciously like a pop song from Earth's 21st century. She's humming, Clorp observed, his voice climbing several octaves. Professor, test subjects aren't supposed to hum during psychological torture. It's an aberration, Vexala snapped, cranking up the difficulty. Increase visual distortion by 30%. Maya squinted at the now seizure-inducing light show and shrugged. You know, if you adjusted the frequency to match human circadian rhythms, this might actually be more effective. Also, equation 47 has a calculation error in the third derivative. Vexala's confidence wavered for approximately 0.3 seconds before reasserting itself with academic stubbornness. Phase 2. Activate emotional manipulation protocols. The chamber filled with sounds designed to trigger every possible human fear response. Crying babies, screeching metal, the dial-up internet noise, and somewhere in the mix, what sounded like elevator music played at the wrong speed. Maya paused in her equation solving to listen. Oh, this is like a psychological greatest hits album. Though honestly, you're missing some key human anxiety triggers. Where's the sound of someone chewing loudly? Or a phone ringing when you're just about to fall asleep? She's critiquing our methodology, Clorp whispered, his note-taking becoming increasingly frantic. Is she supposed to be critiquing our methodology? Continue with Phase 3, Vexala growled, her academic pride now doing battle with a growing sense of unease. Deploy the impossible scenario generators. Suddenly Maya's screen filled with a crisis simulation. She was supposedly responsible for managing a dying space station with limited resources, but making life or death decisions for thousands of beings, all while defusing a quantum bomb and learning to speak Venusian. Maya leaned back in her chair and cracked her knuckles. Okay, now we're talking. First priority, triage the most critical systems, delegate authority to department heads, and create a resource allocation matrix. Also, whoever designed this scenario clearly hasn't worked in customer service. This is basically a Tuesday. She began juggling the multiple crisis scenarios with the casual efficiency of someone organizing their weekly grocery list. Station Commander, I'm routing emergency power to life support in sections 40 through 60. Medical team, focus on the injured in Bay 7 first. And can someone please turn off that alarm? It's very distracting. In the observation room, several other researchers had gathered to watch what was rapidly becoming the most unusual stress test in galactic history. Dr. Doss Blix-Norp, a distinguished scholar whose species was known for their emotional stability, was taking notes so rapidly his writing tentacles were smoking. This is unprecedented, he murmured. She's not just surviving the stress. She's organizing it. Vexala's four arms were now moving so fast they looked like she was having an argument with herself. This is impossible. Humans are supposed to be fragile. They're supposed to break. Maybe, Clorp suggested hesitantly, we underestimated them. Never, Vexala declared, her academic reputation hanging by a thread thinner than her patience. Phase 4. Maximum psychological pressure. What happened next would later be studied in psychology textbooks across 17 different star systems, assuming anyone was brave enough to attempt replication. Vexala activated every stress protocol simultaneously. The chamber became a symphony of chaos, impossible deadlines, unsolvable problems, moral dilemmas with no correct answers, and a soundtrack that combined the worst aspects of bureaucratic hold music with the sound of chalk on blackboards. Maya surveyed the absolute pandemonium surrounding her and did something that broke several fundamental laws of psychology. She smiled wider. Okay, this is more like it, she said, rolling up her sleeves with the enthusiasm of someone about to reorganize a particularly messy closet. Let's see what we're working with here. She began categorizing the various crises with the methodical precision of a seasoned project manager. Right, we've got 17 life-threatening scenarios, 43 moral dilemmas, 89 mathematical impossibilities, and what appears to be a philosophical paradox about whether this sentence is true. Classic multitasking situation. Clorp's note-taking had devolved into what appeared to be abstract art combined with mathematical equations and the occasional cry for help. Professor, she's creating organizational charts, during psychological torture. She's making organizational charts. Maya had somehow procured what looked like a whiteboard from thin air and was drawing flowcharts with the enthusiasm of a consultant about to charge outrageous hourly rates. See, the key is to identify which problems are actually urgent versus which ones just seem urgent. This crisis about the exploding moon? Definitely urgent. This moral dilemma about whether artificial intelligence can love? Important, but not time-sensitive. She turned to address one of the many cameras monitoring her. Also, whoever programmed your AI systems needs to update their emotional response algorithms. The crying child simulation is triggering parental instincts, which actually makes humans more efficient under pressure, not less. It's basic evolutionary psychology. In the observation room, a crowd had gathered. Researchers from across the facility were pressed against the windows like they were watching the galaxy's most disturbing reality show. Dr. Whiskers, a feline-like species known for their calm demeanor, was hyperventilating into a paper bag. This goes against everything we know about stress responses. She should be catatonic by now. Maya, meanwhile, had begun what could only be described as stress test feng shui. She was rearranging the virtual furniture in her crisis scenarios to create better workflow patterns. You see, she explained to no one in particular while simultaneously defusing a bomb, solving a diplomatic crisis, and calculating the trajectory needed to save a falling space elevator. The problem with most stress tests is they assume chaos equals difficulty. But humans love organizing chaos. We turned Black Friday shopping into a competitive sport. She paused to consider a particularly complex moral scenario involving saving either a busload of philosophers or a single brilliant scientist. Oh, this is easy. Save the scientist. Philosophers will debate whether they actually existed until the heat death of the universe anyway. Vex Allah's worldview was beginning to crack like poorly mixed concrete. This isn't possible. She's supposed to be suffering existential breakdown, not providing commentary like she's reviewing a restaurant. Maybe we should stop the test, Clorp suggested, his voice barely a whisper. She's been going for 3 hours and just asked if we had any coffee. Coffee, Maya called out cheerfully, would be great. Also, do you mind if I suggest some improvements to your test design? I'm working on my thesis about xenopsychology, and this is fascinating data about how different species conceptualize stress responses. The observation room fell silent except for the sound of Dr. Blixnorp's tentacles furiously scribbling notes and what might have been Vex Allah's pride dying a slow, academic death. She's psychoanalyzing us, someone whispered. The test subject is psychoanalyzing the researchers. Maya had somehow managed to not only survive the impossible stress test but had turned it into what appeared to be a TED talk about effective crisis management. The key insight here is that you're conflating stress with chaos, but humans actually perform better under pressure when we can find patterns. It's like, imagine if someone gave you a jigsaw puzzle but all the pieces were on fire and you had to solve it while riding a unicycle. Stressful, yes, but also kind of awesome. Desperation makes people do terrible things. In Vex Allah's case, it made her do something that would later be classified as either groundbreaking research or an academic war crime, depending on who you asked. She activated every single stress protocol the facility possessed. The chamber transformed into something that defied several laws of physics and all laws of common sense. Reality became negotiable as Maya found herself simultaneously commanding a space battle, performing surgery on a quantum computer, then mediating a peace treaty between two species that communicated exclusively through interpretive dance, and solving a murder mystery where the victim was mathematics itself. Any rational being should have been reduced to a quivering puddle of existential terror. Maya looked around at the absolute pandemonium and did something that broke the universe just a little bit. She started multitasking like she was born for it. "Okay, team." She announced to the various crisis simulations as if they were her personal staff. "Let's prioritize. Space battle gets immediate attention because explosions are time-sensitive. Surgery on the quantum computer can wait exactly 47 minutes based on quantum decay rates. Peace treaty negotiations can happen in background processing since diplomacy is mostly patience. Anyway. And the murder mystery, honestly, the math probably killed itself. Have you seen calculus lately? It's clearly depressed." She was moving through problems with the fluid grace of someone who had spent their entire life dealing with impossible situations and finding them mildly entertaining. "Captain Martinez." She called out to the space battle simulation, having apparently decided to give her crisis scenarios names, execute delta formation and target their shield generators. "Philosophy department, I need you to consider whether existence is a prerequisite for murder." "Medical team. The quantum computer's left ventricle is showing signs of dimensional instability." In the observation room, what had started as academic curiosity had transformed into something approaching religious experience. The researchers were taking notes, recording everything, and in at least one case, drafting resignation letters. "She's treating multiple existential crises like a customer service call center," Dr. Whiskers observed, his voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for witnessing the birth of stars. "And she's exceeding performance metrics." Maya had somehow created a command center out of pure chaos. Virtual screens floated around her in organized patterns as she juggled 17 different apocalypse scenarios with the casual efficiency of someone checking their email. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" she said, addressing the cameras directly while simultaneously preventing 3 different wars and inventing a new form of mathematics. "You assumed humans break under pressure. But we evolved alongside things like taxes, traffic jams, and trying to assemble furniture with instructions written in 17 languages. This is basically a stress relief exercise." She paused to consider a scenario where she had to choose between saving the galaxy or preserving the recipe for chocolate chip cookies. "Galaxy first, obviously, but I'm definitely backing up that cookie recipe." Priorities, people. Vex Allah was making sounds that weren't quite words but conveyed the essence of someone watching their life's work crumble into amusing anecdotes. This violates every principle of psychological science. She should be catatonic. She should be begging for mercy. She should not be providing helpful tips about crisis management. "Actually, Maya called out, having apparently heard this through the supposedly soundproof observation window, "I could give you some pointers about stress test design. The key is understanding that humans don't just handle stress, we weaponize it. We turn pressure into productivity, chaos into organization, and impossible situations into Tuesday afternoon projects." She was now solving problems faster than the computers could generate them, turning the stress test into what appeared to be the galaxy's most violent game of 3D chess played at light speed. For example, Maya continued while negotiating a hostage situation involving sentient mathematical equations, you could add time pressure that actually matters. Like, I don't know, making me do this while listening to someone explain cryptocurrency for the millionth time. Now that would be psychological torture. What happened next would be remembered as either the greatest triumph in xenopsychological research or the moment when academic pride went to die in a corner while quietly sobbing. Maya completed the impossible stress test. Not just completed it, but finished with what could only be described as a flourish, like a pianist ending a particularly challenging concerto. She leaned back in her chair, stretched her arms above her head, and looked directly at the observation window with the satisfied expression of someone who had just finished a particularly engaging puzzle. "Well, that was fun," she announced cheerfully. "I'd rate it about 3 stars. Good concept, solid execution. but it needs work on pacing and could use better background music. Also, your artificial intelligence personalities could use some therapy. They're very negative. The silence in the observation room was so complete that it had achieved its own gravitational field. Maya continued her review with the enthusiasm of someone leaving feedback on a restaurant that served food made of pure stress. The space battle simulation was engaging, though the enemy AI was clearly programmed by someone who learned military strategy from action movies. The diplomatic crisis scenarios showed promise. But you might want to research human conflict resolution methods. We're surprisingly good at getting people to stop fighting by making them focus on a common annoyance. She paused to consider something that had apparently just occurred to her. Oh, and the existential philosophy components were interesting, but next time maybe don't use questions that humans already figured out. We settled most of those during our coffee break philosophers phase back in the 21st century. Vex Allah's forearms hung limply at her sides, her entire worldview having relocated to somewhere around the vicinity of deep space. "This is impossible," she whispered. 27 years of research, my entire academic career, the paper I was going to present. "Actually," Maya said with the kind of helpful tone that suggested she was about to make everything much worse, "I've been taking notes too. I'm working on my xenopsychology thesis, and this has been incredibly valuable data about how different species approach psychological research methodology." She produced what appeared to be a comprehensive research notebook from nowhere, filled with observations, charts, and what looked suspiciously like psychological profiles of everyone in the observation room. "For instance, Professor Vex Allah, your research approach shows classic signs of confirmation bias combined with species-centric assumptions about stress response. It's fascinating how you've built an entire methodology around the premise that your own species' psychological patterns represent universal constants." Clorp made a noise that suggested his worldview was joining Vex Allah's in deep space. "She's been psychoanalyzing us the entire time. While completing impossible stress tests. She was doing research on us while we were doing research on her." Maya nodded enthusiastically. "It's called participant observation. Very common in anthropological research. Though I have to say, watching alien researchers react to humans not behaving according to their preconceived notions has been incredibly informative about xenopsychological methodology assumptions." She flipped through her notebook with the casual air of someone presenting a doctoral dissertation. "I've identified 17 different cognitive biases in your research design, 3 fundamental misunderstandings about human psychology, and what appears to be a complete lack of awareness that humans actually perform better under stress when we can find purpose in the challenge." Dr. Blixnorp, who had been scribbling notes frantically, suddenly stopped and looked up. "Are you suggesting that we've been studying human psychology incorrectly for decades?" "Oh, not incorrectly," Maya said with the diplomatic tact of someone delivering devastating news gently. "Just incompletely. You've been studying humans like we're rational actors who respond predictably to stimuli. But we're actually chaotic optimizers who turn problems into projects and stress into productivity." She gestured toward the now quiet stress chamber. "This test wasn't torture for me. It was like a really intense escape room combined with a management training seminar. Honestly, it was kind of therapeutic. The academic implications hit the observation room like a meteor strike. Decades of research, centuries of assumptions, made entire fields of study were suddenly called into question by one cheerfully devastating human with a notebook full of observations and the kind of smile that suggested she was just getting started." "So," Maya said, closing her notebook with a satisfied snap, "when do we start the next phase? Because I have some ideas about how to make this actually challenging." 6 months later, the Galactic Academic Council's most prestigious research facility had undergone what could diplomatically be called extensive renovations and, more accurately, be described as a complete philosophical reconstruction of everything we thought we knew about psychology. The facility's new wing was officially named the Human Stress Response Research Center. But everyone called it Maya's lab because apparently humans had a talent for taking over academic institutions through the simple expedient of being aggressively helpful. Professor Vexala stood in her redesigned office, staring at a wall covered with published papers co-authored with one Maya Rodriguez. The titles alone represented a fundamental shift in galactic psychology: stress as optimization, human approaches to chaos management, the therapeutic value of impossible situations, and why everything we thought about human psychology was adorably wrong. The paper has been accepted by the Journal of Xenopsychological Studies, Clorp announced, entering with an armful of academic correspondence. Also, the University of Centauri wants to offer Maya a full professorship, and the Andromeda Institute is asking if she'd consider heading their new Department of Human Studies. Vexala's response was a sound that conveyed both professional pride and existential exhaustion. A human is about to become the galaxy's leading expert on alien psychology. The irony is so profound it has achieved sentience. Through the office window, they could see Maya conducting what appeared to be a stress management workshop for a group of doctoral students. She had somehow turned academic pressure into a collaborative problem-solving exercise, and the students looked disturbingly enthusiastic about their impossible deadlines. "She's teaching them to treat dissertation writing like puzzle solving," Clorp observed. Last week, 3 of them finished their research ahead of schedule because she showed them how to use procrastination as a creativity tool. The transformation hadn't been limited to academic methodology. Maya had somehow convinced the facility's administrators to install what she called productive stress environments throughout the building. These included puzzle rooms for problem-solving breaks, collaboration spaces designed for brainstorming under pressure, and what appeared to be an entire cafeteria dedicated to foods that were optimally stressful to prepare but satisfying to consume. Dr. Whiskers has requested to switch his research focus to human psychology, Clorp continued, consulting his tablet. He wants to understand how humans turn anxiety into achievement. Also, the Zephyrian delegation is asking if we can establish a cultural exchange program. They're fascinated by human approaches to impossible situations. Maya knocked on the office door with the cheerful persistence that had become her trademark. "Professor Vexala, I wanted to discuss the new research proposal. I think we're ready to test human stress responses in actual crisis situations rather than simulations." "Actual crises," Vexala repeated slowly, as if tasting the concept for toxicity. "Well, controlled actual crises," Maya clarified with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested this distinction was important to her. "I've been corresponding with some human emergency response specialists, and they're willing to participate in cross-species crisis management studies. Turns out humans have been dealing with impossible situations professionally for centuries. We just called it things like customer service and event planning." She produced another notebook, this one somehow even thicker than the last. "I've identified 47 different human professions that involve routine psychological stress management that would be considered impossible by galactic standards. Wedding planners, emergency room nurses, software developers working on launch deadlines, parents of small children." Vexala's academic curiosity wrestled briefly with her survival instincts before inevitably losing. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A comprehensive study of human stress optimization techniques applied to galactic crisis management," Maya said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone suggesting they grab lunch. "We could revolutionize how the galaxy approaches disaster response, conflict resolution, and complex problem-solving." Her communication device chimed, and she glanced at it with mild interest. "Oh, that's the Galactic Emergency Response Council. They're dealing with a diplomatic crisis in the Vega system and asked if I might have some insights about hostage negotiation techniques." She looked up at Vexala and Clorp with the expectant expression of someone who had just suggested they try a new restaurant. "Want to come along? I think it could be valuable research experience." As Maya bounced out of the office to presumably go resolve an interstellar diplomatic crisis like she was tackling her weekend to-do list, Vexala and Clorp exchanged the look of beings who had discovered something simultaneously wonderful and terrifying about the universe. Clorp, Vexala said finally, I believe we may have accidentally unleashed humanity's greatest weapon upon the galaxy. Their problem-solving abilities? Clorp asked. No, Vexala replied, watching Maya disappear down the corridor while apparently already planning her approach to interstellar diplomacy. Their enthusiasm. Outside, somewhere in the galaxy, impossible situations were about to become significantly more possible. And Maya Rodriguez, armed with nothing but a notebook, an aggressively optimistic attitude, and a species-wide talent for turning stress into productivity, was ready to help. The universe would never be quite the same. But honestly, it would probably be more efficiently organized.